Okay, I'll make a start, everybody. So, welcome to this session on building digital competency with video. So, this is a first in a series of kind of digital competency based sessions. Um, we're kind of linking in this digital competency stuff with the DigiComp framework. So, that's an EU framework for digital competency. And that just helps us to map over to aspects of that and to build up digital competency in in particular digital tools, digital education tools at MTU. So today we're going to talk about video, and we're just going to talk mainly really around the strategies that you can implement um, in a teaching and learning context using video. And there's a number of tools that we have available to us. The session isn't going to focus as much on the tools themselves, but on the methodology and tools and or tips and techniques really that you can implement in using video. So it's really about kind of framing how you can use video in a teaching and learning context, either from the point of view of yourself generating video content, or for your students in submitting video content as well for assessment purposes or for other purposes. So let's get started there now. And so the session overview, we're going to talk about the benefits of video for learning. I'm sure you're all aware of them, but I suppose this might help maybe uncover some other aspects of video that can be useful in a teaching and learning context. We're going to talk about some pedagogical foundations in using video content. So this will also link into workflows that I'm going to outline. So five workflows using MTU tools that we have available to us. Just to kind of frame it, so there's different scenarios where you can use video in a teaching and learning context, and to frame it in the context of using tools that you have available to you and what they're good at and what they might not be good for in certain circumstances. And then I'm going to do a really quick demonstration for you of a few of those tools. And I'm going to point you then afterwards in the follow-up to a number of tutorials and resources that help you to kind of build up sort of more knowledge of those tools. Okay, so what are the benefits of video for learning? So here are some benefits. I'm just going to discuss them briefly before we get into the pedagogical side of things. And one of the most obvious ones would be on-demand and flexible access. So we have a number of tools available to us, including Zoom, ScreenPal, and we have H5P, which allows us to create kind of interactivity on top of our video content. We also have Canvas that we can use to generate video announcements or on-demand video, and each of those has its strengths in terms of various scenarios that you can present to your students. So, by nature, video is quite accessible, and so on-demand video means that you can, as a student, you can pause, rewind, and rewatch, which are the pretty standard things. We're all probably familiar here with using Zoom, for example, to record sessions or deliver live sessions. And by virtue of recording those sessions, students who are registered as MTU students can play those back afterwards, and you can track their use and the analytics attached to those. But it also serves as a way to support diverse study habits. So, if students need to review content, video is a really strong media or mechanism to make that happen. So I'll talk about the various ways that we can frame that in a pedagogical concept in a minute, but and just covering maybe some of the benefits to begin with. Some other benefit, dual channel learning. So I'll talk about this in a minute in terms of Mayer's principles and cognitive load theory. But this whole idea of combining visual and auditory channels is obviously a very strong component of video, and it helps to improve understanding. So, in your context as lecturing staff, whether you're delivering fully online or in the classroom, video can serve as a place to present various concepts or revisions or screen recordings of complex concepts or software and so on that can be almost flipping the classroom in a way so that you can put these on canvas and your students can take them at their own time and pace. And you can always use those kind of mechanisms as well as feedback mechanisms where your students can feedback on certain elements. It helps to reduce repetition. So video helps you to reduce repeating yourself. For example, the prime example might be explaining an assignment. So from my own point of view, I know this is always something I tend to have to repeat. Having a brief in written form is fine, but if you're going through the various mechanics of an assignment, a video can really tell a lot there. And as we'll discuss in the minute, something like Zoom clips allows your students to ask questions at particular points in the video, and you can respond to those as well. So these types of uses of videos can help you avoid that kind of repetition. You can reuse them. So if you do an assignment or a brief explanation in video in one semester or one academic year, you could repeat that or reuse it in the next one. So, all of this stuff and video by nature as well can be edited, of course, and we'll talk about that in a bit as well. It also enhances teaching presence. So, teaching presence is something I'll talk to you about as well in terms of the pedagogical theory. But enhancing presence, uh, especially, I suppose it doesn't matter if it's a face-to-face class or an online class. It helps you build that connection with your students. So very simple things and low, I suppose, threshold examples would be Canvas announcements, or even in terms of the students hearing and seeing you, providing feedback on assessment. So the speed grader, for example, in Canvas allows you to record video feedback for your learners. And whether you choose to use video or audio in that context, in the speed grader, we get a lot of really, really good feedback from students that, that personal touch, that presence that you give them in that kind of personalized feedback on an assessment is really strong. And oftentimes it doesn't take you too long to do that. You might do your written feedback and you might then record a kind of a summary in the speed grader that just kind of gives them a sense of the feedback or a summary of the feedback. So that's enhancing teaching presence. Active learning, you've possibly all heard of this, and there's various ways that we can promote active learning in the classroom. Active learning in this context refers to how videos, whether you record a Zoom recording or whether you do a screencast or whether you record a clip on your phone and you use that, it refers to how you can add a level of engagement on top of the video. For example, quizzes, chapter markers, reflection prompts, these things that allow the students to have that extra layer of activity and engagement over the video. And it just encourages, retrieval of practice and not just passive watching of content. So that's really key if you want to add sort of engagement opportunities on top of your content, your on-demand content. So another one is then supporting different pedagogical needs. So, for example, if we're talking about screencasting or even recording or demonstrating lab work using a camera or a phone or software, the various pedagogical needs that video affords itself are very strong as well. So you can explain complex processes that might be harder to do in a kind of a written form or graphical form. You can demonstrate things like that, and you can provide personalized video feedback, which I've mentioned already there as well. So just to get on to some of the pedagogical foundations or the kind of the theory that can help you maybe understand how learners deal with video in the best way, I suppose. and principles also that allow us to maybe think about how we create video and how we can think about instructional principles that can make that video really effective. So I'm just going to talk about those for a few minutes before we move on to maybe talking about the tools themselves. So, and again, I'm not sure if some or all of you have heard of these pedagogical frameworks or theories, but they are really useful in the context of video. So cognitive load theory, for example, um, uh, is sort of looking at the idea of your memory. So working memory is really limited in terms of, it can be overloaded quite quickly. And that's why when we're looking at video, it's a good idea to know what it means by intrinsic load and extraneous load. So intrinsic load is I suppose the challenge in the content itself. It's harder topics or less prior knowledge equals heavy load. So the complexity of your content you can adjust by scaffolding or building on prior knowledge. The idea with intrinsic load is that you have existing knowledge. This content is going to build on that, and you can use principles that we'll talk about in a minute to help in how that knowledge is conveyed. And extraneous load, just in the context of video, is just removing the distractions. It's reducing it by keeping your video short and focused. And it's also looking at how that you can segment and sequence and just keep your content and your subject matter very clear in your videos. So there's a useful graphic that kind of covers this. It's by the Education Endowment Foundation there in the top. And this just covers maybe some of those elements I've talked about in terms of, cognitive, intrinsic, and extraneous load. And the idea that, your working memory has a limited capacity. Your long-term memory is where previous information is stored and can be I suppose brought to the surface again. And the stuff on the very top there is how we can think about how best to deal with our intrinsic and extrinsic load and cognitive load overall. So space learning and interleaving, retrieval practice, multimedia learning, these are things that we can link very directly to the use of video. So there's a lot of readings, a lot of theory around cognitive load and cognitive load theory, and research that I can point you to separately there in terms of articles. Here is one actually, and I'll post all of these resources afterwards as well. This is by the um, University of Vanderbilt. So Mayer's multimedia principles are also really useful in understanding how we can use video content or even just any multimedia content. There's three particular, I suppose, components of our principles of multimedia, according to Mayer, that are really useful in terms of video. So, video improves and it uses both channels. So that's your auditory channel and your visual channel. And examples in how you can use Mayer's multimedia principles would be in coherence, so you can strip away any unnecessary information from your video. Modality is explaining with narration rather than text-heavy slides. So it's always, a good idea to have a balance of visual material rather than a lot of text on screen. Signaling then is the principle of highlighting or pointing to key areas. So Mayer's principles, really in summary, in relation to video, is combining visuals and audio, keeping video short and focused, stripping away anything unnecessary, and this all helps to reduce overload, cognitive overload, and keep the attention on what matters. So here are Mayer's principles in their complete form. And you'll see there are others that are relevant as well. I suppose I picked out the three most relevant, but you could think of pre-training, for example. has the idea of, getting your students more familiar with work ahead of them. And personalization as well, the idea, that you can use conversational style rather than formal style in your content. So if you haven't heard of Mayor's principles, do check them out. They're really good and they're broken down and they in their relation to cognitive load as well and teaching presence, which I'll talk about in a second. So community of inquiry is where we talk about presence. That's by Garrison et al. Originally. And I suppose it looks at how we can use video. In this context, we're talking about video to enhance our presence. So the presence in the context of video. So for example, strengthening teaching presence is looking at things like lecture explanations, announcements, things that you can do to supplement your live your classes or your content on Canvas. So they can help you to kind of just build that connection, that teaching presence with your students on the Canvas LMS, for example. Social presence, then building, on students hearing their lecture and their connection. So again, video content can be quite strong there. Students feel more connected when they can see and hear us. So if you're doing, screencasts or recordings, it is good to be able to see you and to be able to hear you. And that connection can help students, obviously. Now, I have my webcam turned off, ironically, but that's just to save my bandwidth today. So forgive me for that. But yeah, look, you're gonna increase social presence by being the person in front of the learning material. So there are various ways that you can leverage your tools to make that happen. And cognitive presence then is, using other type of active elements that you can use. So H5P is an example where you can add that layer of interactivity and engagement on top of video. So that gives you a kind of a cognitive presence combining with active material. So together, these three theories, um, cognitive inquiry or community of inquiry, which looks at teaching presence, social presence, and cognitive presence, Mayer's principles, and cognitive load theory. These three things, and this isn't an exhaustive list, but they are, I think, the most relevant in terms of video and multimedia content that you can look at. They help us to think about how to keep our videos shorter, clearer, and I suppose just more human, readable, and interpretable. And next, we're going to talk about the 5 workflows or tools that you can use in MTU to put those into practice. So in summary, cognitive load theory, the why, so working memory is limited. So thinking of how you can reduce extraneous load and also then look at things that help improve intrinsic load and challenge the content. Harder topics or prior knowledge equals heavier load. Mayer's multimedia principles, how design choices can reduce overload. And then the community of inquiry, that whole idea of presence, the so what. So video strengthens presence in online or blended or flipped kind of scenarios. So just in the context of what we have available to us in MTU then, there are a number of tools we have. Now I've kind of narrowed this down to 5 workflows, but there are probably others that we can look at, and there are more advanced video editing tools available out there and available to MTU staff. I'm just looking at a few of the primary ones, but I'm happy to speak to any of you separately if you're interested in going kind of a level further there as well. So this is kind of a matrix I put together for building digital competencies with video, and it looks at the 4 tools, I suppose. So there's 4 tools, and one of the tools there has 2 features that you can use. So I'm just going to talk through these for a second. I'll share this matrix with you afterwards, and this just helps us to think about how we can think about using video in the context of our teaching and learning practice. So on the top there is a new tool called Zoom Clips. Now, you don't need to worry too much. Zoom Clips is very similar to Zoom. It just allows you to create uh, pre-recorded content and to edit it, but it also allows you to provide feedback mechanisms for your students, so students can comment on the videos, and you can also share out the videos more widely if you so wish. So Zoom Clips is a new feature that's added to Zoom. It's available to all staff and students significantly, and it allows you to do all of the stuff that you might think of doing with video, including, bite-sized explanations, quick assignment instructions. So for example, something that goes through a brief or a lab or something like that, FAQs, things that you want to create quickly, share a link, maybe do a quick edit. And I suppose the big plus with Zoom Clips as well is that you have a very, very quick way to create high quality video content from your desktop. So if you're recording, you can record in both high definition and uh, and 4K if you wish as well. So if you had more complex stuff to record, you can record in 4K and give yourself more leverage there. Um, but I suppose in terms of ease of use, it's I have a kind of a star rating there. It would be a high star rating. And looking at the last bit there, Canvas integration. So where you'd use Zoom Clips is you'd share a link in your Canvas module under a unit as an item or as a link within a page, and your students then can go off to that link. They can authenticate automatically because they're students within MTU, and they can comment on those videos and they can review them. And I'll show you a working version of that in a minute. Another tool that you can use is ScreenPal. So ScreenPal is available to all staff, or to all staff, yes, and you have licenses for that available. I'll put the link actually in the chat, so you can have a look at that as well. So ScreenPal is a screen recording tool. I suppose a lot of people used that tool during emergency remote teaching. Um, the editorial control column, I suppose, just looks at how much you can edit and how much control you have over the video editing process. And ScreenPal does have a high editorial control sort of feature set. So ScreenPal is good if you have a bit more time and you want to record content that you want more control over the editing process and the publishing process. You can also do a lot of things in terms of just annotation. You can combine videos together. You can add graphics on top of video. So it's like a little video editing package in its own right. But as I said, that sort of maybe the learning curve would be slightly higher, obviously, than Zoom Clips, but you have that more control. So in the context of a workflow, ScreenPal can be used to export your video and then upload it or embed it in Canvas. So there's maybe an extra few steps involved there to get your video out, but I suppose the upshot is that you have more control over the editorial process there and the editing of your video. Um, the third tool there is H5P. So H5P stands for HTML5, and it's an integration with Canvas that allows you to create video content within the Canvas LMS. So this is like a mini e-learning authoring tool that you have available to you within Canvas. And going back to the concept of the mayor's principles and the presence that you get in the community of inquiry, cognitive presence in particular. H5P allows you to build comprehension checks on top of your video content. So you can do things that you can't do in the other tools. You can turn existing videos into more interactive type scenario type videos where you add comprehension checks, you add multiple choice questions, you can add branching scenarios, you can have chapter markers, you can do a lot, and you have a lot of granular control over what you do with those videos in H5P. So typically what you're going to do though, and the reason this gets maybe 2 stars in terms of ease of use, is that just that you have to create the video first somewhere else, or you can reuse a video that's already on the internet. So you could use something like a Vimeo or a YouTube video and embed it that way. Or you could use one of the first two tools that we have available to us there, Zoom Clips or ScreenPal, to create videos that you then embed in H5P. So in a way, these workflows aren't just treated in isolation. They can also be used in combination with each other, particularly the first two there. Again, I'll show you an example of what that looks like in a few moments. And then down on the bottom, you have two canvas features available to you. These have a very low editorial control, so you don't really have much control over how you edit them, but you do have a high ease of use. And then you can also obviously work within the Canvas environment to produce these quite quickly. The reason for covering these in terms of digital competency with video is they're extremely relevant to your students. So announcements help you to build up that kind of presence, that social presence. So, students can feel more connected with you when they see you. So you can build videos, for example, that do weekly check-ins. We do that quite a lot in the online masters in e-learning design and development, where we kind of schedule these check-ins, these videos that happen particularly over semester two in that program, because it's more kind of self-directed and they need that type of connection and I suppose scaffolding in the program. It's really, really useful. And in terms of the kind of the input threshold and editorial control, you don't need to do a lot. You plan maybe a script for something like those videos, but you can schedule them then over the course of the semester and they can go out automatically. So, if you've taught a module already a number of times, you'll know that there are times or, milestones within that module that you need to get certain information out, whether it's relating to an assessment or a lab or something that you're doing within the module with your students. That announcements is a really powerful feature that way, and it's a way for you to automate that sort of communication as well, in a low input way, really. At the end of the day, those videos then can be published in Canvas, and they can be really useful as motivational nudges and things like that as well. Um, you can create them at the pointed time as well if you don't want to schedule them. Canvas Speed Grader then is possibly a lesser known use of video and audio indeed, for feedback. And again, we get a lot of really good feedback from students who get this type of feedback within the Speed Grader along with maybe any written content. So SpeedGrader allows you to record more personalized multimodal assessment feedback. So you can explain why the student got a certain grade and what kind of feedback they can take on board. This can be really powerful with formative assessments as well, where they're not really contributing to the overall mark, but they help them to build up the knowledge that they need to be able to get that high grade when it comes to a summative a submission. In the same context, it can give your students encouragement and just clarify how the students can improve overall. So that particular feature is available in the Speed Grader in Canvas and can be embedded directly within a submission within the feedback area. So I'm keeping an eye on the Q&A. If you do have any questions, feel free to add them in there, folks. So Before we maybe talk about a few of the tools and showing you, I think it's maybe a good idea to talk about some tips that can help you when you're creating video. So we've talked about a few of the tools, the workflows, the context of use, but there are some really good tips that you can take just to maybe have as a reference. I'll give you the slide deck afterwards to think about how you can use and create videos for learning. So these actually relate back to Mayer's principles and also to the cognitive load theory. So all of this has a sort of a theoretical grounding as well. So signaling is based on Mayer's principle in focusing attention. So you can highlight important aspects of something on screen. And if you're using ScreenPal, which is the only tool that would allow you to do this, within the tool kit that I'm talking about here. Those arrows, callouts, etc., just help to focus on the element of that needs to be focused on and reduces that extraneous load by guiding your working memory as a student. So if you're developing a screencast, whether it's a software tutorial or whether it's going through a brief or whatever, you can basically add these on top of your content. So callouts, Anne-Marie, would just be almost like word bubbles that have text in them to explain what something is on screen. So you're sort of repeating what's in the auditory channel, complementing it in the visual channel, and just so it's an arrow with a kind of a word bubble type thing. Reducing extraneous load by guiding working memory is the such sort of the point of signaling. There are other ways of signaling. Basically, you can, I suppose, in terms of the way that you frame content within the screen. And also, something like ScreenPal allows you to enlarge certain areas of the screen. So highlighting importance can be done not only with those overlays, but they can also be done in terms of how you frame the content on screen, how you zoom into certain aspects, and how you use maybe contrast as well to focus on a particular aspect of the learning content. Weeding is another Mayer's principle. So this relates to the coherence principle. And look, very simply, it's cutting anything unnecessary out. So, when you're developing a video announcement in Canvas or feedback in the speed grader, you're not going to really have much unnecessary content in there. You're going to be focusing on the feedback. So you're going to be speaking to the student on the screen. You might be doing some sort of live screen share as well, just to maybe go through a part of a written document or an artifact that the student has submitted. But with the others then that we talked about in the matrix, um, going back to here, um, if you're developing stuff in ScreenPal, or even if you're developing that layer in H5P, it's just important to just remove anything unnecessary, because one of the tendencies in using these tools can be to want to use all the features of them, to use all the callouts, to use the various sort of parameters that you have available to you in H5P, but you don't need to use them all. I think reducing that sort and weeding out the unnecessary helps again with that extraneous load, removing the kind of the distractions and freeing up capacity for learning. And all of this has a place as well, by the way, if we were in a face-to-face context. So in a face-to-face context, extraneous load would be the stuff that's happening around the student in the classroom. So it could be the noise within the classroom, it could be the acoustics, it could be the lighting, it could be in the way that the projector is working. It could be in artifacts that you're sharing within the classroom. So all of this stuff, just I suppose if we think about it and how we organize it, this helps to reduce the extraneous load and free up the capacity for learning. Segmenting, this links in with cognitive load theory, is the idea of chunking. And if there's one thing I would that I'd hoped you'd get from this session is the concept of chunking and segmenting. So segmenting basically is breaking your content into smaller chunks of information. And from an instructional design point of view, as e-learning designers, developers, this would be a really big part of designing a course, for example, is breaking your content into smaller chunks and organizing them in a logical way where your students can progress from chunk to chunk. They're getting smaller pieces of information to kind of interpret, and they don't get it all at once. So that's the beauty of online, I suppose, and using tools like Canvas and these video tools is you no limit to the amount of chunks that you produce. So if there was one thing to take away from this session, I would say think about how you can break the content into smaller pieces. You could think of them as little chapters, and your students progress from one chunk to the next, and it prevents that cognitive overload. Um, Simple ways of doing it actually within video are adding chapters within a video, but I suppose the most effective would be to break more kind of complex, longer videos into smaller videos, and then you kind of have the ability then to look at activities that happen between each of those chunks to reinforce the learning. So that's chunking. It's a very simple explanation of what chunking is, um, and segmenting. Segmenting then it also refers to the order and the sequence in which you present those chunks of information. Um, Personal presence. So enhancing personal presence, social and teaching presence relate to that community of inquiry framework I was talking about. So just very simple things can be recording a video welcome, a check-in, or personalized feedback in the SpeedGrider, and then students connect more when they see and hear you. In sorry, Anne-Marie, in an ideal length of a skills-based tutorial. So yeah, it's a good question. Skills-based tutorials are different to maybe your your videos that I suppose one of the recommendations with videos, keep it as short as possible. So you keep it to 5, 6 minutes at a max. But if it's skill-based tutorials, they can be quite different, where you need to cover more content. You can kind of squash it into a shorter period of time. In that context, I would say 20 minutes would be a good length, at an upper kind of a threshold, really. And I'm only saying that based on, if you're presenting this in different contexts. So if you're presenting a skills-based video in the context of a kind of a lecture, say we're for all the world now, we're creating a 1 hour lecture. A 20-minute skills-based tutorial will allow you to build in engagement points on either side of that. So you could have pre-learning before your skills-based tutorial, which could be some sort of a guideline that the student needs before they use that software, or just a number of tips or checklist. The the next kind of chapter after that could be your skills-based tutorial, your video, and then after that could be some sort of an activity to check their learning on that particular piece. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule, but I'm saying it's better to ideally break um, complex videos into smaller videos with chapters, and then have some engagement points or reflection points in between. So it really depends on the context. It depends on what you're covering, but I really wouldn't go over maybe the 20 minutes. And I would consider as well, if it is something longer, that you can maybe use a tool like H5P to build kind of chapters and interaction marks on top of it. So that hopefully answers that question. Retrieval support refers to cognitive load and memory. So, you can pair shorter videos with quick knowledge checks, and that kind of links in what we are just saying there. encourages active learning and builds on and retention. So the key thing really is in retrieval support, you don't have to use H5P. You could use quizzes in Canvas, or you can just build activities that are document based and require submission of the student. But it's good to have something to go with those videos to check the knowledge or ask the student to reflect, for example, in a discussion or something like that. So this looks at um, the, the ideal length of videos. I said kind of 5 to 6 minutes. So yeah, between 1 and 6 minutes is the sort of the recommendation. It's not so much about the numbers though. It's more useful to think about how they'll understand, how they'll cognitively process the content, and how they'll engage with the ideas. So the real takeaway, I suppose, from all of this is look at those tools that are available to you and look at how you can use them in combination with each other to basically get you to that end goal for the students. So um, not to have it as just a passive experience, but to supplement those videos, to create those videos using the principles that we've talked about, and you can read more into those in your own time, but also just to think about how we can reinforce the learning afterwards with kind of reflective activities or engagements.